So let's start in Jacksonville, and I'll come back to my first question. Can you compare Trevor Lawrence last year one of Doug Peterson during training camp to what you saw last week with him now entering year 2 and looking to be a completely different player?
Yeah, that's just the same thing. We're going to say the same thing about Tua. Just being the second year in the system and how decisive his decision-making is, you can tell right off the bat. But the one thing, and we had an opportunity to interview Trevor Lawrence after practice, came over on CBS HQ. And the one thing that he talked about is how much more comfortable where he doesn't have to think to get through his progressions. He knows where to go with the ball. It just comes natural to him. And I think that is why you've seen him make the progress he made from the first half of the year to the second half of the year. And especially in that playoff win when they were down 27-0 and he threw those 4 interceptions and his resiliency on how he came back and how he brought that team back and how he played in the second half. I think that is definitely going to be a springboard going forward on what we're going to see this year from Trevor Lawrence. The other thing that really stuck out at the training camp was that his ability to make off-schedule throws. They did some red zone stuff, and him moving around in the pocket, him keeping his eyes downfield, him putting touch on the ball, just all the things you see an elite quarterback do. You saw Trevor Lawrence making those type of throws during practice.
Let me ask you something, because we hear this a lot, and you mentioned it with Tua and Trevor just now. Second year, grown into the system. These guys have been playing football for 15 years. What is the leap so huge from big-time college football to the NFL that even the best players on planet Earth need time to adjust? Because Joe Burrow didn't need a ton of time, and he's probably the exception, but everyone else, it feels like they need time. So what are they adjusting to?
Well, if Joe Burrow, I mean, he was good his rookie year, but he blew out his ACL.
Right.
It wasn't the Joe Burrow we see now. The difference is their ability to identify what they're seeing in their pre-snap reads, and then post-snap when defenses change what they're showing. So they may be showing a zone, or they may be showing cover 2 with 2 safeties, and all of a sudden after the snap, it rotates to it's only single high safety. So a lot of gamemanship that goes on at the NFL that you don't see in college. But when you understand the system and you don't have to go out there and think, and when you read and recognize what you saw and you can get through your progressions, oh yeah, the coverage just changed on my pre-snap read, I know where to go with the ball now without thinking about it. That's what you see from year 1 to year 2 in the same system.
And it's fair to say that even though college, the Big Ten, the SEC, Big 12 are played at a high level, those defenses are incredibly simplified when compared to NFL defenses, right?
Yeah, no, I just think that's more complicated, and defenses do a better job of disguising what pre-snap and post-snap are. And an example of that was down in Miami when we saw Vic Fangio and a lot of the things that he's doing. So where they don't see all the complications on the defensive side at the collegiate level that you see at the NFL level.
And I'll circle back to the draft part of this. And you've talked about how difficult this has been and how your thought process evolved over the course of your 30 years in the NFL. But how do you evaluate that when you're looking for a quarterback who hasn't seen the looks that you know he's going to see in the NFL?
Right. That's when we tried to identify the mental quickness score. The intelligence score, you have to be intelligent to play the position, but you also have to process quickly. And some guys are smart, but they can't process quickly. And those are the guys that end up struggling. But when you identify that they can mentally identify quickly what they're seeing on the defensive side of the ball, now it still takes time. It still takes reps. You have to see it. You have to make the mistakes. You have to learn from the mistakes. But when you have that mental quickness score or the ability to process quickly, it makes all the difference in the world.
Okay, let's talk about well, first, before we talk about Travon Walker, the first overall pick in the 2022 draft, are you on the Pete Brisco hype train for Trevor Lawrence winning MVP?
No, but
okay.
I do think that he will be up there. We have a little side bet.
You got a lot of side bets.
So, yeah, but I don't know. I don't understand the side bets because Pete never pays up.
That's the bet.
Yeah.
If he pays, you win the bet. He ain't going to pay. All right, let's talk about Travon Walker, the first overall pick out of Georgia from a year and a half ago now. And okay, rookie season, but I think the expectations were that it was going to be a learning process. What should the expectations be for him now? He's playing, looks like outside linebacker, defensive end. I'm not sure what his role is going to be. He's incredibly athletic, but just the lack of experience on that Georgia defense lends one to think that it's going to take time.
I think at least what I saw down there, and I had an opportunity to see some of the one-on-one offensive and defensive linemen go against each other, was that Travon Walker is now starting to put pass rush moves together. Instead of looking, I don't want to say mechanical or thinking A, B, C. A, I speed rush. B, I counter to the inside. C, I counter spin back to the outside and find the quarterback. Now it looks more natural to him. He's still learning, but you can see the difference. Just like we just talked about the quarterback and processing, it's the same thing on the defensive side of the ball where you see Travon Walker now starting to put pass rush combination moves together where he doesn't have to go by the numbers. He's actually just letting his athletic skill set stick out. And he looks more natural when he's using pass rush moves. And he has a pass rush plan where sometimes these young pass rushers just try to rely on their athletic skill set. But at the NFL level, when you're going against the top tackles, you have to have a plan. And you see him starting to put a plan together and becoming more natural at that.
So Josh Allen is obviously one of the edge rushers on this team. Caleb Chase-On, a former first-round pick. Let me ask you this. Who has more sacks this year? Travon Walker or your guy Will Anderson at Houston?
Ooh, I'm going to say Will Anderson.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what Travon's role is going to be and how that's going to translate, but popped into my head, so I thought I'd ask you. All right, let's talk about rookies from this class for the Jaguars. In the first round, they took Anton Harrison, the offensive tackle out of Oklahoma. What are the chances we see him start right away?
Well, down there, when we were down there, they had Walker Little starting on the left side, and then Anton Harrison starting on the right side. So I asked Trent Baalke about how big of a transition is that when you play left tackle to go over to the right side. They didn't think that it was a concern down there. They had told me he had played some right tackle in the past, although it's a different position. But they're trying to find their best five combination now. What was disappointing is the day we were down there, he banged his shoulder up, and I didn't get an opportunity to see him in a one-on-one pass rush situations, and they kind of held him out. So I could tell you this, that Walker Little looks very natural as a left offensive tackle, the kid out of Stanford they drafted a few years ago. And Cam Robinson, as you know, is going to be suspended for the first part of the season. So they're going to have to figure out when Cam Robinson comes back, what's their best five combination? What if Walker Little is playing very well at left tackle? Do they slide him inside the guard and then put Cam Robinson there? But they're really banking on Anton Harrison coming in and being a rookie starter at right tackle.
Yeah, in fact, I think Trevor talked to you guys about Walker Little, who started one game last year, maybe didn't play a lot, opted out of the COVID year, I believe, had injuries prior to that, so he ended up being a third-round pick. But it's, I suppose it's the quarterback's job to talk up his offensive lineman, but you got the sense that he felt comfortable with Walker Little there. And you think Walker Little most likely entrenched there because of Cam's suspension?
Oh, yeah, he'll start definitely at left tackle.
Okay.
And I'm guessing that once that shoulder comes, it'll be interesting to see these guys and follow them in the preseason. But, like I said, I have no concerns just coming out. What I saw at training camp, that Walker Little manning down that left offensive tackle position. And that's his most natural position. That's what he played in college. And he was pretty hyped up, except for the injuries and the COVID year and all that stuff, potentially being a first-round pick at left tackle.
That's right. As a general manager, and let's say the Vikings weren't playing in the Hall of Fame game, would you go back and watch that coach's film, or you didn't care enough to watch it?
The Hall of Fame game?
Yeah, in terms of players that might be on the market in a month or so.
Oh, yeah. No, that everybody is itching because all you're doing for the first 2 weeks has been watching your team practice. And I remember it was like Christmas as soon as the Hall of Fame game come in. everybody was like sitting there watching the personnel, watching guys that made
Okay.
better on it. Yeah, no, that was very exciting to watch. Watch the Hall of Fame preseason game for personnel from a personnel standpoint.
Well, I'm glad you said that because we're going to talk about that game in a second. Some of the players in that game, DTR, of course, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, but our guy DeJuan Jones had a good game too. We'll talk about that in a little later in the show. So if you're a huge Browns guy and want to hear positive things about the Browns, hang around. All right, the Jaguars' second-round pick was a surprise to a lot of people. I like Brent Strange coming out, the tight end out of Penn State. I think you liked him too. They have a lot of good tight ends on this team. They re-upped Evan Ingram. They have Luke Farrell, who they drafted a few years ago, and now Strange. So they have three guys that are going to make the roster as a tight end. Is there any role for Brenton Strange as a rookie? Because he's a pretty good blocker.
Yeah, no, and that's what they talked about down there. And he was rolling in with the ones in their two tight ends.
Oh, okay.
And they had him at H-back, and they talked about the unique skill set he has as a blocker. His tenacity to try to finish blocks. He had a good camp down there. He's still, I think, not recognized for his athleticism in the passing game, but I think he's a very good athlete and can catch the ball very well. But to be honest with you, the guy that stuck out the most, and they're going to have a tough cut, is this Garrett Prince, who came out of UAB, I believe, a few years ago.
Yeah, he's a big guy, right?
Yeah, but boy, did he stick out in the red zone, and had numerous catches, and he's kind of been the star of the camp. So to me, that tight end room is a very strong room, and they're going to have a tough cut to make unless they keep 3 or 4 tight ends. Now, Strange isn't going to go anywhere. He was their second round pick, and they just extended Everett. So
Ingram, yeah,
or Evan Ingram. So they have more than enough weapons at the tight end position. So it'd be interesting to see how that all plays out at the end.
There's no way you keep 4 tight ends, though.
If you don't keep a fullback, you can keep 4 tight ends. And it also depends on what you keep at the other position. So as you balance out your 53, okay, if we're going to keep 4 tight ends, that means maybe we're only keeping 5 receivers. You have to balance out, okay, if a domino effect. If you want to keep these 4, then someone has to go.
Let me ask you about this little organizational trick that you see around the league, and starting around this time of year, when you put a rookie on IR, and you don't want to cut him. You drafted him. You have hopes for him in the future. There's no place for him on the roster right now. You're not going to put him on the practice squad because you're afraid that he might not be around. So you put him on IR, and oftentimes the injury might be a hamstring or an ankle, something that shouldn't last 6 months. Is there any pushback from the league from that? I guess I should ask, because it's clear that the kid's not hurt.
What you have to do, if you waive them injured, this is the procedure. Okay, he has to clear waivers. So if he clears waivers, then he goes and reverts to your IR list, which means, okay, I'm going to waive this player. Let's say it's a 6th-round pick, and you don't know if you want to keep him or not. You waive him injured. He goes on the waiver wire. He clears. No one claims him. Then he reverts to your IR. Then if you don't want him around, you have 5 business days after that to come up with some kind of injury settlement. Usually that may be maybe 1 or 2 game checks along with the rest of the training camp, depending on how it works out. If you cannot come up with an injury settlement, then that player stays on your IR. You rehab him until he's healthy. Then you can waive him healthy off your injured reserve. And a lot of times they're going to want a second opinion. You go back, and it becomes a little bit of a mess. So
let me ask you this, though. What if he's like a 4th-round pick? He needs a redshirt year. You don't have no intentions of cutting him, and you just put him on the IR like you did at training camp.
If he goes straight to IR, then he's done for the year.
Yeah, but is that a sort of a backdoor way of keeping a player on the roster without taking up a roster spot because you want him, and you just slap him on IR even though he's not technically?
Right, but then you're making that decision that, okay, he's not going to be able to practice for the year. And so you're basically wasting a year of development with that player.
Oh, so they can't practice if they're on IR.
No, you're done.
Okay, so that's the workaround. So the league says you can put whoever you want on IR, but he can't be out there practicing 4 days a week.
No, he can rehab and go to meetings, but he can't practice.
Oh, okay, so that's a trade-off. That's the question I had, because I know around this time of year, we see teams put rookies on IR who they don't want to cut, but the trade-off is they can't practice. So, okay, so that actually stunts their development. So that's a conversation you got to figure out. All right. I'll ask a couple more questions about the Jaguars. We'll get this thing moving because you got things to do. Right now on the roster, running back, of course, Travis Etienne's going to be a big part of what they do, but they drafted Tank Bixby out of Auburn. I thought he had a good season last year. Any clue as to what his role might be behind Travis Etienne? Because I'd imagine you can get some carries during the course of a game.
Yeah, no, he looked up the part, everything that you've seen coming out of Auburn on the college tape. I really liked him because I think it runs like a big back. He has excellent contact balance. He's always going forward, and they see him as their definite number 2 running back in that different style than ETN is. But
Yeah.
I think when you have to run the ball, that you're going to see a lot of Tank Bixby in the game.
So I'm looking at the defensive side of the ball, and they drafted Ventrell Miller, which I was sort of surprised they drafted him 4th. We were at that pro day, and he was at Florida forever and a big part of their defense. I didn't know if he had the athleticism to be a top 100 pick or whatever in the NFL, but more power to him. They drafted Antonio Johnson, the safety out of Texas A&M that I thought was going to go a little higher. And then our guy, Christian Braswell out of Rutgers. Any of those names in terms of rookies stick out? And Yasir Abdullah, too, who I liked out of Louisville, as possible contributors, not starters necessarily, but guys who can come in and help that football team.
Yeah, they talked about Abdullah a lot as maybe contributing as a pass rusher this year. And I watched him. He has an explosive first step off the snap. He just has to learn how to use his hands a little better in the one-on-one drills I watched. They're very excited about Antonio Johnson. They thought they got great value for him where they selected him.
Do we know why he dropped?
I don't know why he dropped, to be honest with you.
He ended up going in the 5th round. I thought he was a top 50 guy, but okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so Cisco actually got banged up a little bit, was limited at practice the day we're there. Wingard ended up starting, but you've seen a lot of Antonio Johnson. I think that he will be very good on special teams and be a backup this year. And I see him when I don't believe that they will extend Rayshon Jenkins. So I can see Antonio Johnson kind of playing that role on special teams and a backup and coming in and fighting for a starting spot next year. The 2 guys that were most impressive to me were Braswell, and I know you liked him at Rutgers. I think he has a fighting chance to get some play time.
Nice.
And then Hallett, Eric Hallett was another guy that was a little surprise to me, and he made a couple plays down at practice. So those 2 guys they had spoken very highly of and showing some of the playmaking ability that we've seen in college. But Braswell has a legit chance to get some significant play time on the defensive side of the ball as of today.
So Christian Braswell is a nickel out of Rutgers who we're talking about here. And then Eric Hallett is a safety out of Pittsburgh. He wasn't even on my radar during the draft process. 5'9.5", 190.
Yeah, but they're playing him at Nick as well.
Okay, great. He's listed as strong safety, but he's also in the conversation for nickel.
Yeah, but a guy like that, for example, if he shows up in the preseason and let's say they playing him at Nick, he is definitely maybe a candidate for practice squad.
Yep.
Just because of some of the things he's shown, at least when we were down there early in camp. But I think both Braswell, Johnson, and Abdullah on defense end up making a 53. What you also may see is something similar to Philadelphia last year, where they drafted all those rookies that they didn't have a significant initial role.
Yep.
But a year from now, a lot of these guys are going to have significant roles. The other guy, just to mention, that has made big jumps from last year was Lloyd, the linebacker they drafted.
I know our buddy Pete Brisco, who is the mayor of Jacksonville unofficially, was concerned about why they would draft Devin Lloyd and Chad Muma in the same class. And Devin Lloyd struggled a little bit last year. He got benched. I think they changed his position, or no? Is he still playing?
No, he's still playing linebacker.
Okay.
But what you'll see is because they have to generate better pass rush, because that'll help the back end. And one of the things that Lloyd did so well in college was rush the passer, especially when he was blitzing. So I am anticipating you seeing him blitzing a lot more and being in addition to everyone else that they use in pass rush.
This defense feels like it's going to be pretty good. A lot of
they
young
have an
guys.
Opportunity, if they put it all together, they should be they're pretty good. They just got to rush the passer better than they did last year.
Mike Caldwell, defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, brother of Zach Taylor.
Press Taylor, very got an opportunity to speak with him on the side a little bit. And don't be surprised as a year or two from now, he's going to be mentioned in some of the head coaching circles.
He'll be in the Ben Johnson conversation.
Yes, he will.
Now, are you did you know the Taylors before? Did they run in your circles or no?
Yes, Zach Taylor. I actually met him on the sideline at a Cincinnati Bearcat game when he was the offensive coordinator with the Cincinnati Bearcats. And so I've known the Taylors. First time I really sat down and talked with press, but I've known Zach in the past.
You've done everybody.